From WRAL News, this is Focal Point.
The 1960 CBS documentary Harvest of Shame chronicled the lives of migrant farm workers, including many in North Carolina.
One farmer looked at this and said, "We used to own our slaves. Now we just rent them."
45 years later, North Carolina agriculture still depends on migrant labor, more than ever.
These workers are doing work that American people will not do.
And they live in places most Americans will not live.
It's just ridiculous that we, the ones that are feeding the whole world, are the ones that are here.
Some say the state's migrant housing standards are just fine.
Sure, they're not the Holiday Inn standards, but, you know, it's free.
Others say it's time for the standards to be improved.
North Carolina can do a lot better for its migrant farm workers.
Farm lobbies and leaders oppose higher standards.
Agriculture can be regulated out of business.
But where is the line between a farmer's economic viability and a worker's human dignity?
We don't want to live like kings and queens. We just want to live like people.
Agriculture is North Carolina's #1 industry. Our farm products gross nearly $8 billion a year. And every year, more than 50,000 migrant farm workers help make that happen. Farmers provide those workers with housing because of the temporary and transient nature of their work. Our focal point, the condition of that housing. It may surprise you to learn how little has changed in the past 45 years and how little the state is doing to make sure it's safe and sanitary.
Must the 2 to 3 million migrants who help feed their fellow Americans work, travel, and live under conditions that wrong the dignity of man?
Edward R. Murrow's Harvest of Shame exposed the primitive living conditions of migrant farm workers.
Bad housing, flies, mosquitoes, dirty beds and mattresses.
There is a striking resemblance between the labor camps in Murrow's 45-year-old documentary and the camps in North Carolina today. Many are overcrowded, unsanitary, and still have outhouses.
These are the restrooms.
Leticia Zavala says change is long overdue.
Workers say a lot of times that here in the United States, they gotta stop thinking of themselves as people. And the only thing here of value of themselves is their back and their arms. And that's it. They're like the mules of the U.S., you know?
Zavala knows. Her parents were migrant farm workers from Mexico. She started working in the fields with them when she was 8.
We came here looking for opportunity. And there's no opportunity here. There's just work.
A migrant education program in Florida awarded Zavala a college scholarship when she was a teenager. She needed a letter of recommendation to apply to Stetson University. She asked the farmer she worked for to write it.
He said, "Girl, haven't you looked at yourself? You're a wetback. You're picking strawberries. You're a strawberry picker. What's your problem? Thinking you're gonna go to school." He estado tratando de archivarla.
Zavala managed to get into college anyway. After graduating, she devoted her life to improving the lives of migrant farm workers. Zavala now runs the state office of the Farm Labor Organizing Committee. It's the union that successfully negotiated a labor contract with the Mount Olive Pickle Company in September 2004. Zavala is one of many advocates with organizations across the state who say current state standards for migrant farm worker housing are too low. This one in Nash County meets state standards. It passed inspection just 2 months ago. The appearance of the trailers speaks volumes about their condition. Inside, it was oppressively hot, messy, and in need of repair.
When it was raining these last couple of days, it was leaking from the roof, but we can't do nothing. It's been like that for a while.
There are broken windows, holes in the floor, leaking faucets, rotting wood, a shard of mirror over the bathroom sink. This worker, who's in North Carolina for the first time, says it's not what he expected.
I thought I was going to live better.
Farmer Lee Bissett, who owns this labor camp, says he depends on these workers.
And if not for them, we would shut down. We couldn't operate.
You couldn't get your crops out of the field?
No, not a chance.
Could you get your crops in?
No, not a chance.
But Bissett also blames his workers for the condition of their housing.
Guys come in, especially young guys like this, who are kind of transient, might be for a month or two. When they leave, they might tear the place up. You have to repair it, patch it, they take out screens, windows, and mattresses. So it's a constant work in progress.
Bissett says he keeps them up as best he can. Dale Bone has a large produce operation in Nash County. He says he'd be out of business without his migrant workers.
How many of them are legal?
Probably a very, very low percentage.
Most of his workers may not be legal, but his labor camp is. At one, we found cramped sleeping quarters, flies around food in the kitchen, dirty bathroom facilities, rows of toilets with no privacy, and the same for the showers.
Would you stay in that camp?
Yes. When I was born, just like I told you, I had less than what's in that labor camp.
Bone says the conditions at his camp are better than his workers have at home in Mexico.
The people that we have are just like anybody else with the migrants. They don't know how to use the facilities. They don't have those facilities where they come from. We try to do everything as best we know how to do it, but like I say, we're dealing with a different culture.
And it's pretty bad.
Zavala says their culture may be different, but workers still deserve dignity.
They don't like the fact that they have to use the restroom next to each other and they have to shower next to each other.
How are you doing?
It's a shortage of showers that worries Judy Heck the most.
How about the medicine that you gave him yesterday for his stomach?
Yeah, I want him to keep taking that, take it once a day.
She's a nurse practitioner who cares for migrant workers in Greene County.
Okay, tell him just to breathe normally. I want to listen to his heart.
Judy tells workers they need to shower as soon as they get in from the fields to wash off tobacco residue and pesticides that can make them ill.
You can't get much work out of a man who's sick all the time. Okay, now say,
But her advice is worthless if there aren't enough showers or other facilities that workers need to take care of themselves. Next, a proposal to improve conditions at labor camps and why the State Commissioner of Labor opposes it.
It can always be better, David, but I can show you people who aren't migrant workers who live in conditions that are worse than that.
You're watching Focal Point from WRAL News. In-depth coverage you can count on.
Farmers argue the housing they provide their migrant workers is often better than what those workers left behind in their impoverished villages in Mexico and Central America. Even many of the workers will admit that. But it begs the question, should our housing for migrant farm workers be based on third world standards or North Carolina standards?
I noticed that there's some straw over there. What is that for?
Well, that was the straw they brought for the people to sleep on.
That's a labor camp in Elizabeth City in 1960. This is a labor camp in Sampson County in 2005. Most of the beds don't have mattresses. The law doesn't require growers to provide them. Carol Brook wants to change that. She helped write the proposed North Carolina Migrant Worker Housing Act. It would raise housing standards for migrant farm workers in our state.
And brought up to really what's a basic standard in North Carolina jails in many instances.
Under the current standards, one toilet is required for every 15 residents. The new law would make it 1 for 10. Current law requires one shower head for every 10 workers. The new law would make it 1 for 5. Right now, only one refrigerator is required for 27 workers. The new law would require one for every 10. Current law doesn't require farmers to provide a telephone for emergencies or a mattress to sleep on. The new law would require both. The new law also requires more cooking and clothes washing facilities.
These are the people who are out helping us with our crops, helping us to put food on our table and to help our economy, and we just should at least be able to do the minimum, if not more, for them.
Alexander says lawmakers opposed to the legislation call it the mattress bill. Worker advocates say that shows a lack of respect.
And for someone in legislature who's grown up with probably all the luxuries in this world, you know, to think that, oh, what a bunch of idiots fighting for mattresses. It's part of the ignorance. It's part of the lack of appreciation for the ones who are stuffing their stomachs, you know. They're feeding them cheap.
North Carolina's Labor Commissioner says she opposes the bill because farmers are struggling economically.
Government right now should not be doing anything to put any more burden on farmers or other businesses until we sort this all out, because people's jobs are at stake and their quality of life.
Showing her the quality of life of workers at one of the labor camps we visited in Nash County didn't sway her.
I've got to tell you, Commissioner, I wouldn't want my dog sleeping in them.
Mm-hmm.
And this meets state standards.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes back to the question, is it time to raise the standards?
Well, if you look at that, the question I would have to ask is, it could look a lot better if it could be kept clean.
I pointed out the things that needed repair and the oppressive heat.
It can always be better, David. But I can show you people who aren't migrant workers who live in conditions that are worse than that.
The North Carolina Migrant Worker Housing Act would not only improve standards, but also beef up enforcement. That's a big challenge now. The State Department of Labor only has 4 people to inspect more than 1,600 registered labor camps across the state.
How in the world do 4 inspectors get to all these locations?
Well, they do. I mean, if you look at the numbers we generate with certified camps, they do their job.
Might need to clean up just a little bit back in here.
While the Labor Department is able to inspect more than 90% of registered camps before workers arrive, Inspector Everett Puckett says it skips the rest. Those are the so-called Gold Star growers who've gone 2 years without a violation.
And there's a couple little areas in here where...
Puckett says with so few inspectors, the department can't effectively tackle its biggest problem, unregistered labor camps. And it can't investigate every complaint. Anonymous complaints are the lowest priority. Advocates say, ironically, those are the complaints that come from the workers themselves. Workers too afraid to reveal their identity because they're illegal or because they fear losing their job.
There are a lot of places that we need to be at, but we don't have the time or the manpower to get to.
But the Labor Department has not asked the General Assembly for more money to hire more inspectors.
It's like trying to protect workers on the job in any job that they do. We wish we could put a guardian angel on everybody's shoulder, but that's not feasible. It's just not possible.
When growers are cited for violations, they can usually get the fine reduced. Last year, violators were fined more than $57,000, but paid only about $24,000. The average fine was $456. Growers with fewer than 25 workers get an automatic reduction of 60%.
Our goal is not to collect fines, and we're not bounty hunters looking for fines. What we would rather see is that farmer or that company or that individual spend their money on resolving the safety issues rather than writing a check.
Advocates for workers would like to see the money spent that way too, but say there also needs to be a deterrent to violating the law.
The fines are low, and there are too many ways to reduce those fines.
Windows look good, screens look good.
Puckett says some farmers see fines as just the cost of doing business. Those are the ones he worries about.
A lot of times before I lay down at night, I'll pray and say, hey, don't let any of those places burn down and don't let anybody get hurt. The old oven, is that something that's been there a while? Or
unlike the labor commissioner he works for, Puckett believes the housing standards need to be raised.
The standards aren't enough. They are very minimal.
This camp will hold 50 workers.
Next, a farmer who sees better housing for his workers as a benefit and not a burden.
You're not going to cut off the hand that feeds.
You're watching Focal Point from WRAL News. In-depth coverage you can count on.
Opponents of higher migrant housing standards say they will cost farmers too much. Supporters believe those standards would benefit farmers by providing them with healthier and happier workers, workers who would be more dependable and more productive. Many farmers across the state agree with that. Roger Lane's workers are transplanting sweet potatoes under a hot sun.
These workers are doing work that American people will not do.
Lane hires legal workers through the federal government's guest worker program.
You're not worried about illegal workers being on your payroll.
The peace of mind comes with a price. Lane pays $500 for each worker and must pay them $8.24 an hour. Many farmers cut costs by hiring illegals and paying them only the minimum wage of $5.15 an hour.
Does that make it tougher for you?
Well, I sleep easier than they do, probably.
Lane says these workers return every year, and he wants it to stay that way.
Our boss asks for us again, and we graciously come back again, because here they treat us very well.
At the end of his day, Pedro Cervantes will return to this, a labor camp that looks more like a motel.
There's several camps like this throughout North Carolina. And what I did, I took the good points of each camp and combined them into this.
The kitchen has many more refrigerators, stoves, and sinks per worker than state law requires. And the camp's 4 telephones are 4 more than required by law.
But you could have saved money by building less.
Yes, yeah. Most definitely. But the add-on costs weren't that great for what I think I've accomplished and for the ease of the workers. This is the bathhouse.
The bathrooms have double the number of toilets and showers required by law. Lane understands the importance of workers being able to shower soon after their work in the fields.
The migrant workers aren't a second-class citizen. You know, they have concerns about their personal hygiene, and you furnish them facilities like this, they are well used.
Lane says it didn't cost much to provide privacy between toilets and showers.
You got a bar and some curtains, you know, for $500 you furnish privacy for 50 people, so.
Little dignity.
Little dignity, there you go.
The sleeping quarters have ceiling fans. There are full dressers instead of the small wooden boxes you see at many camps.
Something tells me you want these men treated the way you would want to be treated yourself.
Oh, most definitely.
Lane is not just a farmer. He's a businessman. He didn't base his plans for this camp on what standards are now, but what they may be one day, and also what he thinks they should be for his workers.
We depend on them, and we can't be in business without them. So a satisfied worker is going to do you a better job, in my opinion. The workers have their own refrigerator.
Because Lane meets and exceeds state standards, he's a Gold Star grower. But the Labor Commissioner says out of about 1,500 registered growers in the state, only 200 meet the Gold Star standard.
A lot of bosses don't understand that a happy workforce is a better workforce, you know? The happier workers are, the more likely they're going to produce more.
Next, where is the battle over higher migrant housing standards headed? And where does our state's new Commissioner of Agriculture stand?
Is me paying for a telephone a luxury for the worker? I think so.
You're watching Focal Point from WRAL News. In-depth coverage you can count on. To learn more about the issues covered in this episode of Focal Point, go to WRAL.com and click on News.
Advocates across the state have argued for better housing for migrant farm workers on both economic and moral grounds. But our state's farmers have used the migrant labor system for decades, and change does not come easily. No matter how much arguing the advocates do, there are louder voices in the state capitol.
The people you have seen have the strength to harvest your fruit and vegetables. They do not have the strength to influence legislation.
Since they are not U.S. citizens and most are illegal, migrant farm workers in our state do not have much political clout. Advocates say that's why the state housing standards are so low.
They're low because the agricultural lobby is very powerful in both our nation and in North Carolina in particular, and so there wasn't much inclination to go much above the federal standards. 3 of the most powerful voices in Raleigh oppose legislation to raise them. The Farm Bureau has lobbied against it, calling it overregulation. That sentiment echoes between the Departments of Labor and Agriculture.
which sit side by side between the Capitol and legislative buildings.
My people have been here and been farmers in this community since the early 1800s.
Like many North Carolina farmers, Agriculture Commissioner Steve Troxler has depended on migrant labor to tend his tobacco and produce crops.
And we cannot find the local workers that we need to go into the fields and do this.
Troxler says North Carolina farmers need migrant labor in the face of increased global competition.
It's not a right to have this great abundance of agricultural products at a reasonable price. It's a blessing.
A blessing delivered on the backs of migrant workers. Troxler says without them, the price of food would increase dramatically.
I don't even know that it's a question of how much higher would the price be, but the question would be, could we even produce what we produce now?
While Troxler has no problem with requiring farmers to provide mattresses, he opposes the Migrant Worker Housing Act. He says it asks too much of farmers.
Yes, we need to provide good conditions for these workers. At the same time, we don't need to regulate farmers out of the business of growing food products in this country.
Not required to do this.
But exceeding state regulations for migrant housing didn't put Roger Lane out of business. In fact, his business appears to be thriving. Lane says the money he spent upgrading his housing has paid big dividends in worker productivity and dependability.
That puts about 600-700 gallons a minute of water in that trailer.
Dale Bone, on the other hand, says there is a threshold as to how far farmers can go in the quality of housing they provide for their migrant workers.
And if you raise the standards so high, you'll have no housing because people just won't furnish housing,
Bone believes minimal housing is better than no housing at all.
I've taken showers in places like this before. It's part of farm workers' lives.
Leticia Zavala believes migrant workers ought to have a better choice than that. She says it's not too much to ask for the people who help put food on our tables.
To go to your boss's house to get your paycheck and see glass windows, pretty curtains, mattresses, pillows. And have that be one of your dreams, The land of opportunities, right here.